Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for this patient and caregiver event with Oscar. Oscar, we really appreciate your willingness to share your story today and being here. Before we begin, I wanted to give everyone a brief overview of GammaTile therapy. So there's a picture of the tile itself. GammaTile is a surgically targeted radiation therapy that is FDA cleared for newly diagnosed malignant and recurrent brain tumors. The tile itself, again pictured to the right, consists of a collagen tile about the size of a postage stamp embedded with 4 small radiation sources. At the end of a tumor removal surgery, the neurosurgeon takes about 5 minutes to place the tiles within the tumor cavity. The collagen itself protects the healthy brain cells to reduce side effects of radiation, while a therapeutic dose is delivered to the area in the brain most at risk for tumor regrowth. Over time, the body naturally absorbs the tile. A major benefit of GammaTile is that there's no need for ongoing postoperative radiation treatments, so the patient is able to receive their radiation dose while going about their daily life from home. We're so honored to have Oscar here, who can share his experience with GammaTile from a patient's point of view. So to the attendees, if you have any questions for Oscar, please submit them using the Q&A tool that you'll see at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to them at the end of the interview. So with that, I'm going to introduce Oscar. He's a high-grade glioma survivor based here in Phoenix. So thank you again, Oscar, for joining us today.
Pleasure is mine, Ashley. Thank you for having me.
So let's get started with your story. So when were you first diagnosed with a brain tumor?
I was diagnosed March of 2016.
Okay.
Yeah, quite about nearly 4 years.
Okay,
Yeah.
4 years ago. And so what was that experience like? How did you know you had a tumor?
Oh, well, life-changing experience, right? I had it in retrospect, right? I was thinking about some of the symptoms I had prior to being officially diagnosed. Quite scary, actually. The physical were, I was at work, I was walking with my cell phone. I dropped it, went over to pick it up, dropped it again, and did so about 3 or 4 times. Totally freaked me out. I was like, what the heck's going on? I'm like, I know how to hold a phone, and it's just dropping. I fell into one of the cubes. Literally, I was walking, it just kind of fell over. I was like, what the heck? The more mental, psychological, I mean, there were many moments where I would look in the mirror in the morning and I wouldn't recognize my thoughts. Let's take a moment to think about that. Like, what does that even mean? Mm-hmm. It means exactly that. I was looking, I was like, wait a minute, I'm having this weird type of anxiety that I never have. Why, I was on my way to work and it's like, this is not me. I don't recognize these thoughts. This is not me. And I'm conscious about that, right? Yeah. I'm, a pretty mindful guy. So that's why it can be worse when you're thinking about your thoughts and they don't match what you normally would think, right? For an example, you're not afraid of spiders, but then you see one and it freaks you out. You're like, what? I'm not afraid of spiders. So that's things like that. Yeah. A lot of deja vu experiences as well. So like I walk into a place, I know I've been there before, but it felt like the first time. And lastly, olfactory issues, smelling burnt smells. So it's quite a few things that I just chalk up to stress, right? Nobody thinks they walk around with a brain tumor, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you went to a neurologist to get a scan at that point?
Yes, yes, ma'am. Before that, I went to sleep apnea place. I went to a cardiologist because I was a young, healthy guy. I was 33 years old, and I looked and it was still performing fine. Nobody would think you have a brain tumor. So after getting healthy scans and tests, then that's when I was recommended to go to a neurologist.
Okay, and there they found a mass.
Yeah, quite a massive mess, to say, lack of a better word. I mean, I was went well. I got a phone call that afternoon, just to give you an idea of how quick things move when you see a grapefruit or melon-sized tumor in your brain. Wow. I got a call to do my taxes with my wife, and I got that call, and I was very actually happy as my neurologist calls it, and I was happy. I was like, hey, I got my MRI, and happy I was going through my action items, if you will. And he's like, that's why I'm calling. And that's kind of when I found, and I started to be a little bit suspect. Like, wait, what do you mean? That's why you're calling? He said I had a mass. And my heart dropped, and I said, "Wait a minute, what, what, what do you mean mass?" And he's like, "You have to come in." So I was like, "Can you tell me?" He didn't want to tell me. And the next day, first thing in the morning, he showed it to me, and I was like blown away. It was a about melon-sized tumor in my right temporal lobe, and I had the proverbial light flash before my eyes. I said, "Do I have a chance?" And he said, "I don't know," and the rest is all history.
Oh, wow. So at that point, were you referred to the Barrow Neurological Institute?
Yes. I'm incredibly grateful to have my neurologist, Dr. Hetrick. He had a relationship. He actually was, colleagues with some of these Barrow physicians. So he immediately shipped that over like that next morning. And he gave the CDs to me, and he told me to meet, or at least deliver them to Dr. Chris Smith. So this happened quite quickly, like day after stuff. Yeah. Very fortunate to be in Phoenix, actually, too.
Yeah, that's a great point. And what was the tumor type that you were diagnosed with?
Oligodendroglioma, grade 2, so low-grade tumor. I was told I had the right tumor in the right place at the time. So I have a tumor. If you win the beautiful lottery of brain tumor or brain cancer, the one I had was a good one to have, prognostically speaking.
Great. And so what was the first treatment you underwent for this tumor?
Surgery. 2 days later.
Wow.
Yeah, you have a tumor. Okay, surgery. It's like, wow. It's actually brilliant because knowing me, if I knew I had a tumor in my brain, I would have freaked out. I mean, I was freaked out nonetheless, but I don't want time to pass knowing I had a tumor. As a matter of fact, they said don't even drive because I could seize and blah, blah, blah. So they put me on a steroid and said don't do anything because you have a massive tumor that can kind of disrupt things. So yeah, 2 days later, I was rushed into surgery.
Wow. And so surgery was obviously a success.
Yeah.
And did you have any adjuvant therapies after that surgery? Any like chemotherapy or radiation?
No, I was tumor board recommended it, right? That's as you may and the patients listening may be well aware of, like, standard care, chemo, radio, and that's what was presented to me up front. My neurosurgeon, Dr. Chris Smith, best surgeon in the world as far as I'm concerned, he said, "Let's wait. It's low grade. Let's wait." And so at that point, we're in March 2016, and I was literally surgery, about an 11-hour surgery, and I started relentless research and my research, strategy, and found out about the ketogenic diet. So that was kind of the first phases of my journey.
Okay, great. That's great to know. And so you mentioned that you had a recurrence. So when did your tumor first recur?
Great question. So as I alluded to, I started surgery, keto, 2 years. I was back to work too, actually. I worked for a tech firm, fully functional guy. I was, transitioned slowly, but was full throttle very shortly after that. In 2 years, I was in and out of MRIs, and I was performing and feeling like myself, like I had not gone through any surgery. And then I think, in retrospect, I think I took on, I should have certainly did a little bit, not taking on a big workload and a lot of stress, of course, traveling. And then I started to feel a little bit differently. So emotionally, I started feeling a little bit anxious, which I don't normally feel. And I knew something was up. MRI happened, and January of 18, nearly 2 years later. Sorry, can you hear that?
Yeah, it's okay.
My dogs. Apologies.
Yeah.
And so 2 years later, then I had a recurrence, and I took time off of work again, and had a laser ablation, which effectively is surgery, but they go in with a laser and ablate it. So it's like a heated laser.
Okay, great. And then at that point, did you start any chemotherapy or radiation?
No. At that point, the strategy with my team was let's be non-invasive. I'm doing this diet. had a second surgery at this point. Let's try Optune. So Optune is what I'm wearing now. See, if you guys can see, I have a little, it's basically a little cover on it, but it's a, you know, a little pretty elaborate device here, but it sends electromagnetic signal. And I started that. And so at that point, 2 surgeries and Optune is, you know, what was my strategy, really. So we're in 2018 at this point, 2 years and some months.
Okay. And your wife was expecting at that point, right?
Yes. Yeah. So that was one of the toughest times that I've had in my life, where I was kind of over the whole I got brain cancer part, but, you know, 2 years, you kind of feel like you again. And then being told, you know, having my wife with a big, massive pup in her tummy and expecting, and then being told I have recurrence, that's a tough pill to swallow.
Very hard. Absolutely.
Yeah, very difficult. So very emotional, of course.
Definitely. And so what were the options on the table at that point?
Well, okay, so after I did Optune, so that had, so just to clarify, that October, that same year, I had my second recurrence.
Okay.
So did Optune, 2 surgeries, keto diet, and then boom, second recurrence. And my son was born at the time, of course, between that first and second recurrence. He was born in July. And I was devastated, of course, as you can imagine. I said, hey, I'm wearing Optune. I haven't done standard of care, but I'm doing a lot of things. Like, you know, I'm going after it. And then my neurosurgeon said, let's pull the trigger on standard of care light. Let's try this GammaTile. And that was basically it. We did a surgery in October and implanted GammaTile. And, you know, Smith highly recommended it. Very, very localized. And to attack that second recurrence in the same exact spot where I had in my right temporal lobe, in that cavity. So basically, I have a pretty big, massive cavity here. Within the cavity, it grew, bladed it, probably not as aggressive as it should have been, and then went to GammaTile for the first time, and it completely obliterated it. And that was the first time I started standard of care, 2.5 years later, in October of 18.
Okay. So how did Dr. Smith or your radiation oncologist explain your radiation treatment options? So was it just GammaTile therapy, or were you considering other radiation therapies as well?
That's a great question, actually. Yes. Quite frankly, my radio oncologist wanted me to do IMRT. And we've always been trying to circumvent it, not because I'm against radiation, but because the size of my tumor cavity is pretty big. So in order to do it effectively, you have to radiate my whole brain. As I alluded to already, I'm 33, 34, actually not 34 at the time. I was a, fully functional employee at a tech firm. I need my brain to function. I'm doing a lot of analysis, a lot of traveling. So and my neurosurgeon, he knows me very well. He knows I want to preserve my brain, my healthy tissue, and keep me. Yeah. So when he mentioned GammaTile, I kind of questioned. I said, "Isn't that? I thought we didn't want to do radiation just yet." He said, "No, low risk, very low risk. It's going to preserve healthy tissue," and I trust his judgment very well, much so. And I give the thumbs up, and I felt very confident that it was going to keep me healthy and just attack what it needs to in a very small spot where it was recurring. And that's why I went forward with it. I was very comfortable in doing it back in October of 18.
Okay, great. So you had they removed the recurrence and then they laid GammaTile down. So how was that procedure compared to your other craniotomies?
Oh yeah, it was brilliant. I mean, it was seamless, quite frankly. Like I don't feel anything. There's no secondary effects. So it's not like I'm kind of walking around feeling like fields of radiation going through. It was exactly how my other craniotomy went, and the laser ablation for that matter. Felt fine. It's almost as if there's nothing there, quite frankly. So I think that if anything, it actually gives you a higher sense of security, because I think it's pretty well known that surgery alone doesn't really take out all the cells, right? You need something else, a secondary thing to kind of knock out whatever is left. So knowing that I had the GammaTile, especially the first time, it felt comforting knowing that something was attacking those residual cells that you can't get through surgery. So, if anything, it was a positive.
Yeah, so to know that you're fighting it kind of while you're healing and going about your life, you're doing something more.
Something to speak to peace of mind, Ashley. I think that's something that's like the underrated thing that nobody talks about, but it's a huge thing for a patient, knowing that something is working and attacking those nasty, ugly cells that come back more aggressive, which it did. So I didn't say that, but when it did come back, it came back to a grade 3. So I became malignant. It became malignant, if you will, by definition. And it was good experience.
Great. That's great to know. So how about side effects or hair loss? Did you experience any of those with your GammaTile procedure?
I started to float and glow. No side. No side effect. It was, of course, with brain surgery, with GammaTile, there's brain surgery. And when they kind of open up your skull and go through and extract tumors, you're going to have some fatigue and such. But no hair loss whatsoever. I made a little incision. They embedded the sources within my brain through that little incision, and I just recovered as if, through a normal brain surgery. Yeah. So no adverse effects from the surgery.
That's wonderful. Good to hear. So I know that you recently had another surgery in March and received GammaTile therapy. So when your tumor recurred after your first GammaTile therapy treatment, was it in the same location that was previously treated, or was it somewhere else?
So this was my third recurrence. Mm-hmm. The first two were in the same spot, right? After the laser ablation came back when I used GammaTile, so it was that same spot. This third recurrence was in a completely different area. And that question, I asked that specifically to Dr. Smith. I said, hey, I've done GammaTile, I'm doing Optune, what's going on? This now recurred by my brainstem, very incredibly sensitive area. And after doing the, analysis, he said it's probably was outside of the range of that first GammaTile. It's in a completely different area, different part of my brain. Yeah. So that's, for the second one, when we were going after GammaTile, it was completely, outside the scope of the first sources that were embedded.
Interesting. Okay. And since your surgery, have you had any follow-up scans, and how is everything looking? Are you pleased with the outcomes?
Sure. So my 8th brain surgery was on March 5th, 2020. So where are we? 8 weeks out, roughly. So I had a follow-up post-op surgery about 3 weeks ago, and that was to remove the staples from the side of my head. Interesting times during COVID, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, geez, it's not a fun time to be a patient in brain surgery world during COVID, I have to admit. But we looked at the scan, and it looked great. He resected a majority of it, and GammaTile, the sources, took care of the rest, and it looks phenomenal. I'm just continuing to recover, from the surgery.
Well, that's fantastic to hear. We're so happy for you, and you have a great team.
I do. I'm very, very fortunate. And I know not many people get to GammaTile treatments, but I have to admit it's doing what it needs to do, and I feel great. I feel fine.
Absolutely. That's great to hear. Let's hear about your experience with COVID-19 a little more. So you mentioned that it was kind of strange to go into the hospital. What happened?
Oh yeah, great. That's an interesting experience. Hospital is like a fort. It's it's a lot of security, and when I got there, literally all the entrances were blocked, so they kind of send you around the hospital. And I'm like, okay, sure. Go in and I'm really, immediately stop in place to say, what am I doing here? As if I'm, robbing a bank.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So yeah, I'm like, I have staples in my head. I just came out of brain surgery, and they wanted verification and all such. So luckily, one of my oncology nurses was walking by, like, no, he's with us, he's fine, and walked right in. So I sat down with my neurosurgery team, and they immediately gave me a mask and gloves. And this is literally the beginning, inception of this whole COVID. So that was still kind of, foreign at the time. That people weren't walking around with masks. So I'm like, okay, I'll take a mask, whatever, right?
Yeah. Oh my God.
And I took it, yeah. And then it was an interesting experience. I mean, at that point they weren't doing telemedicine just yet, but we met, and it was like, it's kind of eerie. The hospital was empty, like, like literally, almost like literally haystacks going by the airplane drop. And it was kind of, it wasn't like it wasn't the most upbeat experience, but got the staples out, and that was that.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Thank goodness you're not having to return for ongoing radiation treatments right now, and going into that high risk environment. So
Couldn't imagine. No, that would definitely be, like, of course, highly risky for a person, so like with high risk person like myself. My immune system has kind of been impacted, and excuse me. Yeah, it's definitely no place for someone like myself to be in and out 5 days a week. Had I hypothetically done IMRT, because let's take a step back. Going into this 8th surgery, the tumor board had recommended IMRT. And also this other hospital, Barrow, they also wanted me to do a IMRT. So had I gone with consensus, I'd be back in. I was still, to this day, right now as we speak, be going through for radiation treatments, which is incredible. A guy in my position has no business being in the public, exposed like that, especially at a hospital where there's so many patients that have COVID. It's not, would have been, kind of dodged a big bullet there, to be honest.
well, it's great that you were able to advocate for yourself and really fight to get the treatment that you wanted. Another question we had, is there anything you want other patients considering GammaTile therapy to know? Is there anything you would have wanted to know kind of at the start of this?
Well, there's no long-term side effects. That was one of the key points that I think was very important to me, because I want to still be me. I want to keep my quality of life. And Dr. Smith and team reassured me that this wasn't going to be something like 5-10 years down the road it was going to affect me. I'm going to start feeling kind of deficits and neurological deficits and such. I think a lot of people are just happy to be alive and like, oh, do whatever, just light me up, and just as long as I'm alive. And I certainly don't feel that way. I'm more, I will be an old man. I want to maintain my quality of life as a young professional and father. I need to still be me, take care of my son, just finished walking him around the block. Mm-hmm. And I think that low, very, very low risk of any long-term deficit. One thing I think folks should know, like the short-term pain for long-term gain is very important to know. So the one thing I didn't mention was when the one only adverse effects that I had was I had to be away from my son. He was 3 months at the time, right? So I had radiation in my sources in my head. You don't want to be around a kid or people around for about a month, let's say. And that was the only adverse effect that I had, was more the emotional effects of having a son and having to be away. But I feel phenomenal. It was one time, one deal, and that's it. I'm not going driving to downtown Phoenix. I'm about 35 minutes from the hospital, back and forth daily for 5 weeks to get external beams that will affect my healthy cell. So short-term pain for long-term gain. I'd like to kind of add that. One of the things, and I'm being very, candid, is the company. Folks like yourself. I met the senior leaders there at a conference, the Snow Conference. Incredibly humble people, very personable. It's like they cared about me as not just a patient, as a person. I've never had that experience with any company. Even like I've been 4 years in, I've dealt with pharmaceutical companies, the Optune companies, and I've never felt like this camaraderie between like patient and the staff and such. I think that's something. Yeah, it's like you're part of a family kind of thing, right?
That's wonderful. We're so happy to hear that, because our mission is improving the lives of patients with brain tumors, and we really do care very much about you and patients like you. So I'm so glad that you feel that way.
Yeah, you guys are awesome, and yeah, I think that means a lot, especially when you guys advocated for me when I was fighting to get GammaTile. That meant a lot. So there's a lot of collaboration behind the scenes to help get me the treatment that was the best treatment for me for my third recurrence. So I think it speaks volumes to the company and the people, right?
Oh, thank you. We got a couple more questions. So one of them is, how long do you wait post-surgery to start wearing Optune again?
Great question. That's a little bit subjective. I actually just went through it right now, right? So typically the guidance is clearly the bare minimum is you want the scar to heal, right? Because it goes over your head, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I for this one I waited about a month because because we're in COVID. I think that had a lot to do with it as well. I'm at the moment my son's home. I have to take care of him. It's bloody hot outside, right? As we know, there's some kind of restrictions with wearing Optune. So I took a month before I put it back on, but typically it could be a couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, let's say, just to allow the scar to heal, and you just go right back on it. There's no hesitation because I have GammaTile sources in there or anything like that. It could go on the next day, hypothetically, if the scar was healed. It's more about the scar. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. And then we had a question about insurance. So did your insurance cover your GammaTile therapy treatment?
Absolutely. Oh yeah.
Great.
If anything, they probably prefer it because I'm not going back and forth and going through these very expensive radiation treatments. So yeah, that was never point of contention whatsoever. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, and just to add to that, so GammaTile is covered by Medicare and most private insurance companies.
Sure. Yeah, that was brilliant because as I mentioned, been in 4 years. I've done these sequencing, Optune, and those kind of were battles back and forth and getting approvals, blah blah blah. With this was easy breezy.
Fantastic. That's great to hear.
Sure.
Okay. Do we have any more questions? Leave it open. Well, if there are none, Oscar, thank you again so much for coming to share your story. You're such a great guy, such an inspiration. You're a great advocate for yourself, and we're just really grateful to know you and to have you here with us. So thank you. And then to all the patients and caregivers and advocates who are watching us, please visit our website, GammaTile.com, and there's a contact form on there. You could reach out and we can send you a patient information kit if you'd like, and we can answer any questions you may have. So thank you everyone so much. Thanks, Oscar.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.